Driven by intensity and purpose, Truett Cathy begins each day with the excitement and anticipation of a child awakening on Christmas morning. Giving in to personal weariness, fatigue, or frustration is simply not an option for him. In Truett's mind, there is always a way to get the job done. Never give up, he will say. There is some solution for every problem if you explore all possibilities. Resolute in his values, which are based on biblical principles, he never gives in to moral compromise. Though kind and generous to all, he remains firm and determined. His story will encourage you to look deeper, go further, and try harder. Those words come from the preface of the book that I wanted to talk to you today about, which is called Eat More Chicken, Inspire More People, Doing Business the Chick-fil-A Way. And the book itself was written by Truett Cathy, who was the founder of Chick-fil-A. The preface was written by Margaret W. Carter, who was the longtime assistant of Truett Cathy. And I found those words extremely inspiring and give a really nice summary of one of the most common traits that we see on the show in all of those founders that you and I study is the fact that when you're following your purpose in life, work simply becomes play. And for Truett, as it says, for him, it feels like he's a kid waking up each day and it's Christmas. And after reading this book, I can 100% say that it really was Christmas for Truett each and every single day. He really loves his business, and it shows through as you're reading this book. The book overall itself is pretty short. It's about 190 pages. You can read it in a couple of days, and I highly recommend it. It's packed with very wise advice from Truett himself. And if you'd like to pick up a copy of the book, you can use the link in the show notes. That's going to take you out to an Amazon affiliate link that I set up. And if you do use that link, I donate all profits from that affiliate program to benefit children's literacy. And I really do think that Truett would want you to use that link and buy this book because he was very passionate about kids and molding and shaping their future. He had established the WinShape Center Foundation. In this particular foundation, supported foster homes, summer camps, college scholarships, in mentoring of young adults and children, and it literally changed thousands and thousands of lives. So I would highly recommend the book. I see this as a very compact PhD in business, especially if you're in the restaurant business. One of the things that I really loved about this book is Truett's view on opportunities. He says right here, the history of Chick-fil-A is in fact a series of unexpected opportunities. When we respond to them, we often found ourselves richly blessed. The Chick-fil-A sandwich itself was born in the wake of an unexpected opportunity. When one of my first two restaurants burned to the ground, I found myself with time on my hands and the ability to develop a new recipe. And we're going to talk more about that development of the sandwich later on in the episode. After that fire, Truett, he's just devastated. But as we heard, it gives him the opportunity to develop a new chicken sandwich. And it's just an example of a beautiful opportunity that never would have existed if that fire hadn't resulted. This is just a powerful thing to keep in mind. We saw this with Sam Walton, who took to selling in those small towns in rural America where no one else ever attempted to do business. He found tons of business in those small towns. And that's just one example of an opportunity right there where he just went out and he made that for himself. It's also the same with Trader Joe, who pulled his inspiration from books and magazines, and he followed the health trends. Trader Joe, he has this saying that I really like. He says, the dots are there, they're just hidden. We really can't connect all of the dots. We just need to keep our eyes open and look for them. And once we find them, we need to grasp those opportunities and connect everything together. Truett, like no one else on the show that we've ever studied, he is a wizard at finding those dots, piecing them together, and leading with a joyous heart. He says, we change the world and ourselves by our response to unexpected opportunities. How will you respond today? And I couldn't agree more. Such a simple and compact statement. How will you respond today? It's all about how we respond, the opportunities that are in front of us. You might have a few dots connected together, but the next ones are hidden. When they present themselves, what are you going to do with them? Are you going to connect them to the dots that you already have and keep driving forward? Or are you going to ignore them? I think the lesson here is to always keep your eyes, your ears, your mind, your heart open to the opportunities that we're presented with. They may not look like good opportunities at the time, but as we explore them and we develop them, they become more and more connected to what we're doing. It's always about keeping our minds open to the opportunities. So, what I'd like to do here is just jump into the book and take a look at Truett's life. And for him, everything starts in 1921, where he is born at home to a poor farming family. Now, they don't stay in their original home very long. His father had failed at farming, and he quickly moves the family to Atlanta. He changes careers going into the insurance business, but his father earned almost no money. And it wasn't just that particular time in Truett's life, it was all through the time he was growing up. And his mother had to step in and help out the family. And without his mother, I don't think that they would have survived. And my take on his father from the book was that he was generally very hardworking, but he didn't have any business skills and he wasn't very supportive for Truett in his efforts when he was growing up. And Truett takes us even deeper into his father here and gives us an insight into how he was. He believed that the only way for him to prove his manhood was to rule the roost. We had to do as he said. He left no room for debate. To people outside the home, Dad must have appeared to be a good husband and a father. But at home, he was very hard on us as a family and on me as a kid. He appeared to take joy in lashing out at Mother with his tongue. In my notes here, I wrote mask man. Out in public, he appears one way, but at home, he's harsh and he's abusive. Thankfully, Truett's mother, she is really the true guiding force of the family. We see this a lot on the show, where the mother is really the rock of the family. I've been thinking about doing a specific episode on mothers and how much impact they've had on the various founders that we've studied throughout history. One that comes to mind is Andrew Carnegie. His father had failed in the textile industry as newer machines came available and steam power caught on. His father didn't embrace that and he stuck with the old ways, and this sunk his business at least twice that I know of. And his mother stepped up and she led the charge to lead the family so that they could survive. And another strong mother that comes to mind is that of Sam Walton and his mother, who guided young Sam into business as a youth. He would go to football practice, she would milk the cows, he would come home, and then he would go out and deliver the milk to the neighbors. And that got him kind of started in business as a young man. She educated him and helped him along the way. I really do think it's the mothers that make a huge, huge impact on a lot of the founders that you and I study here on the show. And as I'm thinking over the elements of that, I do hope to have an episode or a bonus episode on that in the near future, because I think there's a lot to learn there. Now, if we jump back to Truett, I just wanted to take a look at what his mother was doing here. Just listen to this. My mother began taking boarders into our rented home. For $1 a day, a boarder got a bed. We put 2 or 3 beds in each bedroom and 2 meals a day. We only had 1 bathroom, so the boarders had to schedule around each other. Our family, of course, got the bathroom last, with the children bringing up the rear. My 2 brothers, 4 sisters, and I took our baths on Saturday. Rearing 7 children and running a boarding house with 7 or 8 more people left Mother with no time to relax or to read books. She made all the boarders' beds and kept their rooms straight, cleaned the bathroom, and cooked breakfast and supper every day, including Sunday dinner. She spent much of her time in the kitchen, and I spent many days alongside her, shucking corn, shelling peas, sitting at the table, and washing dirty dishes. Almost every night, my mother received her reward, compliments on her cooking from her boarders. And just imagine that you're a kid, you're living with your family and 7 or 8 boarders. That is just nuts. But key things here that I learned from reading that section, the first is Truett, he's learning what real service means by helping his mother here. And this feeds into everything that he does later on in life and in business. He develops this true heart of service. And then, second, he's directly in the kitchen and he's learning how to cook. This is a young Truett. He's building his library of knowledge for the future. He says the following: years later, I used the same concepts of marinating and cooking when I developed the Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich. Third point here, he observes firsthand how his mother runs that boarding house. She's fair and she's honest. And I see all of these the seeds that are planted inside of Truett that are going to grow throughout his business career, and he's going to pull from these early learning lessons. That's why I believe his mother was just so monumental to his development and long-term success. If we just stay here for a moment on his mother, that is, I want to go a little bit further on this. I was 8 years old when I decided it was time for me to earn my own money. So I started selling Coca-Cola door to door. I realized that I could buy 6 Cokes at the grocery store for a quarter, sell them for a nickel each, and recognize a 5-cent profit. That was the beginning of life in the business world for me, knocking on people's doors and asking them to buy a Coke from me demanded an awful lot of courage. As an 8-year-old, Truett decides to start working. This is pure observational. He's watching his mom with all of those boarders. And I believe more is caught than taught. He's constantly watching her actions, and he's taking action of his own. He makes his own choice to start working. Let's keep going here just for a moment. As a little boy, I had a speech impediment so severe I could not pronounce my own name. My mother wrote my name on a card so that if I had to introduce myself to strangers, I could let them read it. And that takes some major courage, as he said. His mother was instrumental in making sure that he could do his job properly as he was getting started in business. And just think about that. I mean, you're 8 years old. How easy would that have been just to give up? You get turned away a few times as an 8-year-old. You're like, okay, well, I'm just going to go play in the dirt or play with sticks or do something outside. Why am I going to be punishing myself like this? But he just kept going. And by doing that, he's going to be presented with a new opportunity. It's very slight here, but it's an opportunity. And he takes this and he runs with it. One afternoon, a neighbor told me, Truett, we'll buy more Cokes from you if they're iced down. And that's the opportunity right there. He doesn't let that pass him by. Back to the book here. So I ended my door-to-door sales and built a Coca-Cola stand in my front yard. My mother helped me nail together some 2x4s. Then I chipped some ice from the icebox in the kitchen to cool my drinks and opened up for business. My market shifted from the woman on her front porch to insurance salesmen and other thirsty people coming down Oak Street. Now, why was that important? Well, the lady on the front porch, that is his target market when he first starts. But she could also go to the store and buy those 6 same Cokes for 25 cents, just like Truett. His new target market, those that wanted the iced down Coke, those are people that are out walking around on the street. They just wanted a cold Coca-Cola on a hot summer day. That's the new target market. That's the game changer for a young Truett. Business grew, and I soon was buying cases of 24 Cokes for 80 cents directly off the Coke truck. That doubled my profit to 40 cents a case. I expanded my line to New Grape and Orange Crush, and Mother convinced me to buy my own ice from the Iceman instead of chipping it from hers. The Iceman came down the street in his horse-drawn carriage selling 25-pound blocks for 8 cents, and if a block was broken, he would give it to me for free. Those last couple of words, give it to me for free. I wrote score in my book after that. But that is just a young Truett right there learning about cost control. Why not take the broken ice? You're going to chip it up anyways, and you're going to get it for free. That is absolutely perfect. At 8 to 10 years old, Truett, he's watching every single penny. His parents didn't have a lot, and this is just ingrained into him, and it's going to stay ingrained throughout the duration of his life. And if a young Truett, he can do this, well, it's just super fuel for you and I to always be watching our cost. And I think we can let that free ice of a young Truett be inspiration for us. What is your free ice? Where can you save a little bit of money or cut some costs? It's all about controlling the costs. In this cost control allows Truett to save up $4. What is he going to do with it? He's going to go buy himself a bike. And it's not for pleasure, it's for business. He soon starts selling magazines door to door. And then this leads him to slinging newspapers. At this point in his life, his family really needs his help more than ever. I saw every week that my father still contributed nothing financially, and Mother needed my help. The little bit I offered, however, could not keep the debt from growing. This debt, it forces the family to move into a project, and it was called Techwood Homes. In this housing project, it was the first in the United States under President Roosevelt. Even with subsidized housing, it still was not enough. Truett, he uses that bike on a brand new paper route, not an established one where you already get like 50 or 100 customers to deliver to. It's brand new. He has to go out and develop the whole thing. And he doesn't complain about it. He just accepts it as the way that it was. And his major task here is to start building his business. And how does he do that? One customer at a time. I see this as just a huge, huge learning lesson that he's going to use later on as he opens his first restaurant. Develop your customer base one at a time. He says in the book here, I had to prove to each customer that I would do the job right, then follow through on my commitment. The key to succeeding with the paper route in the restaurant business, I would later learn, is to take care of the customer. I had to do the job whether I felt like it or not. If I was running a fever, or if I were in the middle of a thunderstorm, or the electrical lines were on the ground, or we had an ice storm, my customers expected their papers to be delivered. Truett, he knows the value of his customers. Let's keep going here. This is super valuable right here. To keep my customers, it is always easier to keep a customer than to replace one. I did more than sling the paper haphazardly towards the front door. I put it wherever the customer asked me to put it. So for like example, he might have an elderly customer who wanted it placed on the rocking chair, or they might want it put inside of the door so that if it rained, it wouldn't get all wet. So he delivered it exactly where his customers wanted them. Now, this next basic and simple way of working it pays for this whole book. Truett says, I have tried not to lose a single customer. I treat each one like the most important person in the world, and delivered each paper as if I were delivering it to the front door of the governor's mansion. That's an image that still works to improve customer service. So simple. I love it. Imagine that you're serving the governor or even the president, maybe even your hero. For me, that personally and instantly changes my entire mindset. Even as a podcaster, I try to imagine delivering and talking to one single person, that person in business who can use all of these valuable lessons. I think that if we take this insight from Truett and we put it into action, it changes our mindsets and it changes our relationships with our customer. And you know what? It's plain and simple. I really do believe that this will grow your business. And I'll ask you, who are you serving? Think about that the next time you're serving your customer. Are you serving the governor, the president, your hero? What's your mindset? Treat everyone with the highest level of respect and give them the service that they deserve. Such a valuable, valuable lesson that Truett teaches us. Now, if we head back to the story here for Truett, word of mouth spreads quickly. And he says, the most effective way of promoting my business didn't cost me anything but a little kindness. Oh man, as soon as I saw that sentence, I just got a huge smile on my face. A little kindness is absolutely right. It goes a long, long, long ways in business to helping you grow. When people see that you care, they're just more willing to interact with you and give you their business. As Truett's paper route grows, so does his confidence in business. My success with the paper route convinced me that I would one day open a business of my own, most likely a service station, grocery store, or restaurant. In following this path, as Truett enters high school, he starts taking business classes in bookkeeping and typing. Now, what happens next here is key, and let me just read for you. He also introduced us, he is this teacher. He's talking about his high school education here. He also introduced us to a book by Napoleon Hill that had just been published, Think and Grow Rich. In it, Mr. Hill wrote, whatever the mind of a man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. As I read Mr. Hill's book, I realized I could do anything if I wanted it badly enough. His words motivated me and showed me that I live in a do-it-yourself world. Talk about a double dose of confidence right there that really fuels Truett forward in life. And as a quick side note here, I would highly recommend that book, Think and Grow Rich. I've read it a couple of times. I find it highly motivational, regardless of your age or your position in business. One selection from that book that I find really motivating. So as Napoleon Hill was writing this book, he surveyed a lot of wealthy men, businessmen, and here's something that he noticed about all of them. More than 500 of the most successful men this country has ever known told the author their great success came just one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them. And that is something that we've seen a lot on the show here, where a founder starts a business and they fail, they have an idea and they fail. Keep going, because when you're following your purpose and your passion in life, the risk in front of you, they're not really risks. You're doing something that you love. You keep pressing forward. And it's often one step beyond the hardest thing that you've ever done, where you kind of start climbing uphill and you start seeing a little bit of success. That observation of failure by Napoleon Hill, as Truett reads that as a youth, he's going to understand that, and it's going to apply to him later on in life, because he's going to have a lot of failures in business. He's going to be presented with a lot of challenges, and he always pushes forward with the spirit of service, and he overcomes those challenges and those failures. In the face of failure, we just have to keep pushing forward. We're going to overcome those, and we're going to have success. We have to push through it and keep a positive mindset. Now, if we jump back to Truett's book here, we're at the point where he's graduating high school and he decides to go into the Army. But his service here in the Army is going to be really short. He's going to be discharged due to a skin condition It says when he would go outside in the sun, he would come down with this rash. So just as he was getting ready to ship off overseas, he developed this condition. They would discharge him from the army because of it. And it's really odd because he says as soon as he got out of the army, that condition went away. Is it divine intervention? Possibly. He might have went overseas and never came back home. Once he gets out of the army, he heads back to Atlanta, where he decides to go into the restaurant business with his brother Ben. He doesn't decide to initially start his own restaurant. He learns about a restaurant franchise called Little House. And at this time in the restaurant industry, these little restaurant stands were popping up all over America. I know we've kind of touched on this in the past, like in the Carl Karcher episode. Carl was the founder of Carl's Jr. He started off with these little hot dog carts and these little metal buildings that he would bring in and put onto a little piece of land that he had purchased. Then he would start selling hamburgers and hot dogs. So this was really popular, these little breakfast houses or little lunch houses or little restaurants, if you will. So the name, I guess, was fitting, the Little House. So him and his brother, they go into a training program. It's a 7-week program. They're working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And at the end of the training program, Truett and his brother Ben, they're both expecting that they would come out with their own franchises. But instead, they're told that they'll be given one franchise between the two of them. That's simply not going to fly. That's not what they had signed up for. So what do? They flip the script. They take the opportunity that they got here, the training, they've been there for 7 weeks. They now have a good general idea how to run a restaurant. And they take this information, they don't dwell on the fact that they've just been screwed over here on what they were expecting. They don't place blame. They simply make a pivot and they start off on their own. It's a strong lesson for us that we can't dwell on those failures. We have to keep moving forward. And this really was a good thing that this happened for them because they're not stuck in some franchise system. They get to go out and develop their own way of doing business. Right away, we see that Truett is 100% all in. I sold my recently purchased Chevrolet and we pooled our resources to come up with $4,000. Then we borrowed $6,600 from First National Bank of Atlanta. And we were naive enough to think that for $10,600, we could buy any part of the world that we wanted. That right there reminds me a lot of Joe Colomb when he was trying to get his early Trader Joe's off the ground. At that time, it was called Pronto Markets. But when he was starting, he went 100% all in. He really loved that business, so much so that he sold his house, moved into a rental unit, took all of his wife's money, borrowed money from his mom, borrowed money from his dad, and anyone else who would lend him money, and he puts it all into the business. He was 100% into the business. And when you're following your purpose in life, like we mentioned earlier, those risks, they're not really risk because you're doing exactly what you love. And when you're putting your heart and soul into something, it's absolutely going to pay off. And for the two brothers, they find a vacant lot near a Ford motor plant. They buy it for $2,500. This gives them a solid foundation of customers that are going to frequent the future restaurant. And they don't just sit back here, they put their hands into the dirt. Ben and I did much of the manual labor, digging footings for the foundation and the like. We worked as fast as we could, generating no income until we opened the doors. And as the building goes up, they go out and they look for used equipment. They buy a fridge and a grill and a table and stools. Everything's used. They look for things that were in good condition that they could put into the restaurant. This feels a lot like how I opened my first restaurant. I did almost all of the light labor, including the cleaning and the painting, the minor plumbing and the electrical, tile work. I had to learn how to do tile work. That was brutal, but I did it. Built the bar. I installed the lights and the shelves. Now, I did call in the professionals for the major work, the heavy plumbing, the heavy electrical, in the fire suppression, but where I could, I did most of the work myself. Then, like Truett, I went out and I bought most of my equipment used, good condition used equipment. I really believe that being in the weeds allows you to know how things work in the business. When an electrician comes in and he starts talking about pricing, you have a general idea of what he's talking about. And you can do that in all areas of your business. That's exactly what Truett and his brother did. Now, as they start off here, they start with a simple menu. We printed a limited menu offering breakfast items, a small steak, a hamburger, and a few other items, but no chicken because it took too long to cook. And at that time, when they start off in 1946, everything with chicken was bone in. So it really did take a long time to cook and get out to the customer. If we keep going here, we can see how they did on their first day. On May 23rd, 1946, Ben and I opened the Dwarf Grill. And the Dwarf Grill is going to be later renamed to Dwarf House. With first day sales of $58.20. Our work was just beginning. Truett, he takes another step here that I really love. He rents a room right next to the Dwarf Grill. And why would he do that? Well, I think if you've listened to some of the past episodes, you'll have a good understanding. But let's see what he says here in the book. If the cook or waitress needed me after midnight, they walked across the parking lot and tapped on the window. The parking lot was gravel, so if I heard a lot of cars crunching over it in the night, I got out of bed to see what I could do. In those early days, it seemed, I grabbed a few hours of rest whenever I could and spent the rest of my time in the restaurant. That reminds me a lot of Harry Schneider, who was the founder of In-N-Out Burger. Harry had a little place right across the street from his first restaurant. What he would do at nighttime is he would relax and watch a little television, but he always kept his eye looking out the window. And if he saw the drive-through line starting to get quite long, he would run across the street and hop on the grill and serve the customers. And another founder that I've been studying here quite a bit is Todd Graves, who is the founder of Raising Cane's. I've listened to maybe 7 or 8 podcasts that he's been on just in the last week alone. And when he first started Raising Cane's, he said basically he was working around the clock and he had this little apartment out back of his first restaurant. And he would just go back there and sleep for 3 or 4 hours at a time, come back to the restaurant and start working again. He was 100% all in on what he calls his chicken finger dream. For Truett, it's just his dream to run a business, and he's all in right here. He's really doing what he loves to do, and it's play for him. When you're deeply driven like Harry Schneider, Todd Graves, and Truett Cathy, it's easy to jump in anytime. The fun is always calling your name. It's an unlimited supply. These guys are doing exactly what they love, serving their customers. Now, one thing that I admire a lot about Truett is his decision to close his business on Sunday. And why does he do this? He explains this for us here in the book. Ben and I had attended Sunday school and church all of our lives, and we were not about to stop just because we owned a business. Our decision to close on Sunday was our way of honoring God and directing our attention to things more important than our business. If it took 7 days a week to make a living with a restaurant, then we needed to be in some other line of work. Through the years, I have never wavered from that position. For me, that is extremely respectable. He follows his principles and he doesn't change his path for more money. For over 80 years, his business has been in operation and they've been closed on Sundays. This is a decision that my wife and I have also made for our bakery and our little restaurant to be closed on Sundays. I find for us that it has huge benefits. Everyone knows that we're closed on Sunday, so what does that do? It drives them into the restaurant during the week and on Saturdays. And then in addition, we also see that a lot of people apply to positions that we have open because we're closed on that Sunday. They know that they have a dedicated day off that they can use to spend with their family or worship or do other interests that they would like to pursue with that day off. So if we hop back into the book here, as the restaurant opens, Truett says that things start off slow, kind of like that paper route from years before. But Truett, he had to build it one customer at a time. The way they approach their business with a steady growth and a mindset on cost control. From my view, this is how so many on the show have been successful. Truett, he teaches us his way right here in the book. He says, "We didn't have any money for advertising. We had to build our restaurant on satisfied customers one at a time. We were profitable from the very beginning. We had to be, but the profit was skinny and we kept our overhead low to maintain it. These days, people come up with a concept for a restaurant chain, borrow as much money as they can, rent a fancy office, and start out with the image of success. I like our concept better. So do I. We stayed on top of our expenses and never faced a bill we couldn't pay." And that really takes a lot of discipline, lots and lots of discipline. It reminds me a lot of what Henry Ford would say. He says that if you control your costs in business, you can face a couple of mistakes and not go out of business. If you don't control your costs, you're going to be screwed when you face a situation in business. This also feeds into their commitment. The key to our success, I'm convinced, was our commitment. When you're fully committed to something, you're not likely to give up or become discouraged, and you're not likely to fail. Commitment works in our business life as well as in our relationships with our family and with the Lord. When we're fully committed, strange and unusual things happen. Amen. I could not agree more. When you're fully committed, strange and unusual things are going to happen. You're going to be successful. I 100% believe that. Along with a cost control commitment, they're also committed in the following ways. I think this is really deep here. We ground our own meat and cut our own steaks and maintain a reputation for good meat and food quality. The task of keeping a restaurant open 24 hours a day, 6 days a week was grueling. Ben and I were working 72-hour weeks or longer. When a grill man or a waitress didn't show up, I found myself working double shifts. Once, I worked 36 hours at a stretch, eating meals between flipping eggs and cutting meat. And you can understand very quickly why they cherish that Sunday off. 72 hours a week, that is just brutal. Then you blend their hard work with their focus, their deep focus here on customer service. I worked hard to memorize the likes and peculiarities of our regulars. Many of them would eat the same thing every day. Maybe a sandwich with mustard and no mayonnaise, or eggs cooked a certain way. One customer always wanted one egg sunny side up and the other over light. I began prepping his order when I saw him in the parking lot. I learned that some customers are extra hard to please, so I worked harder to be their friends. As we can imagine, with that focus on his business and his customer service, for Truett, things are really looking good here. And he's starting to think about opening a second location. He's dating his future wife, Jeanette. It's Saturday afternoon, and Truett, he's looking forward to his day off. He's had a hard week here at work. His brother Ben had taken the afternoon off to go flying with his other brother, Horace. And their plan was to fly from Atlanta to Chattanooga for an air show that was scheduled on Sunday. Now, as the brothers leave, there's bad weather, so they end up landing in this little town called Rome. The weather passes, so they head back up. But for some reason, they go up at nighttime, and the plane that they had rented, it didn't have any gear to fly at nighttime. So they start signaling SOS from the plane lights, and it's probably best if we just jump into the book here because this is very sad. A man on the ground near Dalton saw the plane flying low and signaling SOS with the blinking wing lights. The men called the state patrol, who quickly organized a makeshift lighted runway of car headlights shining on a wide field. My brother saw the lights and attempted to land, but a wingtip hit a patrol car's radio antenna. Whichever man was piloting the plane gunned the engine to take it back up, and it rose about 30 feet and then fell flat like a pancake and burst into flames. Ben and Horace, my only brothers, were both dead. Ah, geez, that's just devastating to read. It's just a brief section here in the book where Truett talks about this. I can't even imagine the range of emotions that he went through here. Truett, he's going to buy out his brother Ben's share of the business from his wife. And he's going to go even further and see that she and his daughter are well provided for the duration of their lives. But as Truett moves forward, he takes his deep, deep drive and he starts to scout out a second location. And he eventually finds one across the street from the army base that he had served at so many years before. The building, it goes up the Truett way with his hands in the dirt, lots of hard work in his eye on the cost control. Meanwhile, at home, he's got 3 young kids, and those Sundays, they become even more valuable for him. He says that as a family, they never went on lengthy trips, but what they would do is he would take off on a Saturday afternoon, they'd be gone on Sunday, and then they'd come home late on Monday. They took a lot of these little mini trips. And as a restaurant man, while he was out on these trips, what do you think he might do? If you listen to the Sam Walton episode, I think you might already have a good idea. This is pure Sam Walton right here. Let me just read this for you. We made lots of stops along the way, and not just for bathroom breaks. Whenever I saw a fast food restaurant I hadn't visited, I stopped, went in, and observed their operations, taking away ideas on what was or wasn't working. All the time, the kids just wanted to get to Florida so they could jump into the Atlantic Ocean. That part just makes me smile. Going in and out of those restaurants, seeing what's working, what's not working, and then taking away the best ideas and using them in his business. That's pure Sam Walton. Sam spent more time in his competitors' stores than the competitors themselves. Now, I don't know if Truett was in the competitors' restaurants more than they were in their restaurants, but he uses that approach to learn about what they're doing and taking all of the good parts. That's just a simple idea that you and I can use in our business to always be looking at your competition, see what they're doing, see the things that are working really well and how you might implement those in your own business. I find that just to be pure gold. I do that a lot. I like to go into cafes and restaurants and bakeries and see how things are set up and see what they're doing. And every now and then, I find a good idea that works. Opportunities, my friend, the key ones, they're in plain sight. It's just our job to go out and find them. Like Joe Colomb said, the dots are there, they're just hidden. All right, so as we keep moving forward here, Truett, he's going to spend the next 10 years working those 2 restaurants. 10 years, my friend, learning, developing, and growing his business. From the book here, we can learn a little bit about this from his perspective. Both restaurants were successful, and I probably could have continued building new restaurants every 5 years as I had planned. But it didn't take long to realize that 2 was plenty. It was like having 2 full-time jobs. If I wasn't having problems in one, I was having problems in the other. And I asked myself, who needs more problems? On a cold night in February, my problems were reduced by half. So fire is going to destroy his second location in February of 1960. Truett calls it a blank slate. Everything was 100% a total loss. In the step he takes here next in business, it kind of shocks me. Truett, he experiences a really big mistake in his choices, and in doing so, he discovers something very deep about himself. I just want to walk you through this because what he's seeing in the restaurant industry, in fast food chains like McDonald's, is this growing sense of self service. The way he was conducting business at the time was customers would walk in, they would sit down, they would order off of a menu. Self service, the customer walks up to a counter, places an order, and gets their food in a very quick way. Obviously, it's called fast food. So, what he does here is he takes out a business loan for about $90,000 to rebuild that restaurant. Once he opens, it's full stop self service. His customer base, they come back, but they don't like it. They're used to the good quality table service. Now, true, he was still giving them a good level of service, just the way that he was servicing them was quite a bit different. If we jump into the book, we're going to see Truett's realization here. I realized by the end of our first day of business, however, that I had made a terrible mistake. Customer after customer sought me out to tell me, "We don't like this. We like for a waitress to come out and take our order." They didn't like the new concept of standing at a counter to get their orders and waiting for their food to be delivered. Many customers absolutely refused to clean their tables when they left, leading to additional problems. The pressure, it keeps building. And Truett says the following: I had spent 15 years building my business in the two restaurants, and I would likely lose both of them if the new concept didn't work. In my book there, I wrote big gamble. This is what it is. It's a really big gamble. He makes this big decision and he realizes he's made a mistake here. So as I was reading this, I was kind of thinking through in my mind, what is he going to do to get out of this situation? And for me, I was thinking, okay, well, he's going to rebuild his business. New customers are going to eventually show up. They're going to get used to the new style. He might take a huge hit for a while, but eventually things would turn around. And this is kind of where I was shocked. If we keep going here in the book, we're hit with this deep discovery that I mentioned earlier. I learned something about myself in those days. It was terribly unrewarding for me just to ring the cash register in the restaurant and collect money. I'm motivated in my business by the compliments I receive for our service and the food quality. It really is all about the service for Truett. And this is killing Truett not to give his customer base the service that they expected. Think back to his paperboy days when he's delivering the papers exactly where customers wanted them. And what he says about it's easier to keep a customer than get a new customer. Then we think about all of the opportunities that he might have available to either try to reshape the business or take it in some other direction. And this is what's going to happen to him. He's going to have an opportunity that gets presented to him when his friend Ted makes him an offer. If you like, I'll lease your building and buy your equipment. And Truett's response to this: I took his offer, and the lease helped me pay off the loan and gave me additional income. God has a better plan for us than we have for ourselves. When I was suddenly relieved of the responsibility of a second restaurant, I had time to think. What's next for Truett Cathy? It was time for me to pray the words of little service. I know you are with me, Lord. You're going to protect us. Next time, I'll go all the way. And what he doesn't know is that this time to think and connect with God, it's going to lead him to Chick-fil-A. And this happens in a really subtle way because you see, one day he gets a call from a friend who was in the poultry business. And he says to Truett, we developed this boneless, skinless chicken breast for an airline, and they had wanted it developed so that they could put it in their service tray. Well, after they had developed the chicken breast, it didn't fit the tray properly, so the airline no longer wanted these chicken breasts, and they had a whole bunch of them, and they didn't really know what to do with it. So they were reaching out to Truett to see if there's anything that he could possibly do with it. And like a true gift from the heavens, Truett believes that the chicken problem is solved. He had tried many times in the past to serve chicken on his menu. It just didn't work because when the bone is in the chicken, it just took too long to cook. So with this boneless, skinless chicken breast, Truett, he starts to experiment. In those early days in the kitchen helping his mother, they come back to help him right here as he starts to develop his recipe. I remembered my mother's method of covering the pan with a heavy top, creating something of a pressure cooker. I tried that and found that the chicken indeed cooked faster and remained more moist as well. Then I discovered the recently introduced Henry Penny cooker, a pressure cooker that used oil and could cook the boneless chicken breast in 4 minutes start to finish. All our chicken could be served fresh. This is just a huge step forward for him. Next, he puts the chicken breast on a buttered bun, he says, but it wasn't quite right. There was something missing here. And we really get to see Truett's deep drive and his focus for perfection right here when he's developing this chicken sandwich. The meat needed seasoning and a nice breading. I worked for years adding this, taking away that. I was up to more than 20 seasonings and breading ingredients, twice as many as Colonel Sanders and his secret recipe. I knew that when I finally found the right recipe, it needed to be complicated so no one could replicate it easily. And then, well, for testing each variation that he came up with, that was kind of the easy part. Each time I changed the formula, I tested it on the customers. I had fun in the kitchen and enjoyed the feedback. Finally, after about 4 years of experimentation and testing, customers said, "We like it. Don't change it again." So this goes on and on and on. And finally, after 4 years of customer feedback, Truett learns that it's perfect. And it's his customers that tell him it's perfect. It's not him saying it's perfect, it's customer feedback. Once he knows that he has it perfect, he says, "I folded the recipe and put it in my pocket. I called it the chicken steak sandwich, and my customers loved it." Soon, our new sandwich was outselling hamburgers at the Dwarf House, and I wondered how to widen our customer base. Now, from past experience, Truett, he knows that he doesn't want to go out and open another restaurant. He takes a different approach, and it's really simple. He creates a plan of attack. First step is to create a clever name for the chicken sandwich. Second is to sell it to other restaurant businesses. And then third, the customers would buy it and enjoy it and basically repeat step 2 and step 3. Now, the first step, he goes out and he meets with a trademark attorney, and he learns that he just can't trademark the words chicken steak sandwich. Those were too common. He really needed some sort of variation against the name, like a misspelled word or an upside down word or something to make it unique. So based upon this advice, it's action time for Truett. And he says that everything really came together really fast. If we hop into the book, he explains how this comes together. I began to reflect on the product. Which was the best part of the chicken? A boneless breast. It occurred to me that the best cut of beef is a fillet. Why not call ours a chicken fillet, or a Chick-fil-A, or Chick-fil-A? The name literally just came to me, with a capital A for top quality at the end. We registered the name in 1963 and had the logo design. And I had heard on a podcast that they only paid $75 to have that iconic logo that we all know today designed. That's quite impressive. We see here for Truett, after 17 years in the restaurant business, the Chick-fil-A name is born for the first time. That's really amazing. It took 17 years. This isn't an overnight success thing. 17 years. That's just to get the name. He hasn't even barely started here, but he does have the name down. That's the first part of the plan. The second part is to find customers. So, what does he do? He goes out and he attends the Southeast Restaurant Trade Association yearly convention. He sets up a booth there and he serves some Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich samples. And I see this as showing in action. He didn't just tell others what he had to offer, he showed them directly. And this makes all of the difference. The folks literally ate it up, and we walked away with dozens of verbal agreements. Within 4 months, 50 restaurants were selling Chick-fil-A. That's what I call executing a plan. It all comes from action, action, and more action. Then you mix in focus and hard work. How are you not going to be successful? Simply pure gold for you and I to learn from this. A simple plan with action can have big, big results. For Truett, sales increase, but it doesn't take long for Truett to become concerned about the quality of the product. Remember, he's always focused on quality. Truett, he is a 100 out of 100 type of guy. And he says, we begin to realize, however, that licensing our product might not be such a good idea. For a while, it was one of the easiest ways to sell, and it was almost impossible to maintain consistent quality. What he would see is like some restaurants would cook all of the chicken in the morning, they'd let it sit around until lunchtime. That decreased the quality of it. Some would add their own condiments or their own ingredients, customizing it. And he really doesn't like that. I had mentioned Todd Graves earlier. He was very similar to Truett with his focus on quality. When Todd started off his business Raising Cane's, he grew by selling franchises. And what he saw was that those that were running franchises couldn't produce the quality that he wanted. He says that they would run 85 out of 100, but he wanted them closer to like 97, 98 out of 100. He says they were still doing a very good job, but it just wasn't the quality that he wanted through his corporate restaurants. So he really shifts his focus and he goes back to just developing corporate owned restaurants. And he eventually buys back a lot of those franchisees because they couldn't deliver the quality that they wanted. This is the exact same thing here with Truett. He really wants 100 out of 100. He's focused on quality and that high level of service. On page 80 of the book, Truett says the following: I needed to control quality, and the only solution I could think of was to open my own restaurants, a prospect that still didn't appeal to me. But like everything in Truett's life, it's all going to start through a subtle suggestion or an opportunity that's really in plain sight. You see, his sister Gladys, she has this little gift shop in the mall. And well, the mall concept, this was very new in America at the time. And his sister, one day, she says to Truett, you know what? There's nothing to eat in the mall. People come in and they shop and they leave. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. There's nowhere to eat. Well, Truett, he takes that very seriously. He says, whenever I visited Greenbrier Mall, I noticed that except for the coffee shop at Woolworth's, the Magnolia Room at Rich's, and the Orange Bowl, there was no place inside to eat. I liked the idea and immediately contacted the shopping center manager, who told me the developer wasn't interested. And Truett, he pushes back. They weren't interested because they were worried that if there was a restaurant in there and they were cooking inside, that all of the smells coming from the restaurant were not going to be pleasing to the customers. But Truett, he really does push back against the mall and he says, hey, look, if you have some place in the mall where customers can eat, they're going to stay and they're going to shop longer. That's going to be more sales for your customers that are in the mall, and all good things are going to result. The manager of the mall finally comes to his senses and agrees to Truett's points. And so what does he do? He finds a small store that had went out of business and he signs a lease for 384 square feet. That is not a lot of real estate for a business, but he moves forward. And with such limited space, this really forces Truett and his team to think simple. And this simple thinking, it really takes big intentional decisions because you have to and cut more. What are the most important critical items that you need to have in the restaurant to function and service the customer? And one thing they did to figure this out was they laid out the store footprint in one of their office buildings, and then they cut cardboard boxes out that mimic the shape of their equipment. And then they can move everything around and come up with the most efficient way to build out that 384 square feet. And it worked really well for them. They didn't have to go in with equipment and mess around with it. They already had a good idea from that small scale experiment. Then, as a result of that, they make a really bold decision here on how they're going to do their cooking. He says, "We decided to do all of our cooking out front in view of the customers." That was kind of revolutionary in the fast food business because most of the restaurants just cook their food in the back, out of sight, out of mind. He's like, "No, we're going to do it right in the front." And that was an idea that Truett had gotten from visiting various steakhouses in high-end grills. He's like, "Well, if they're doing it with great success, I'm going to do it here too." In this concept, it really catches people's attention right up front. They can see where their food's being prepared. Just from my own experience here, using the similar type of concept where customers can see you cooking, it really forces you to be super cautious with your food prep and your cleanliness. That's things you should be doing regardless of where you're cooking your food. But when customers can see you in full view, you're even more conscious of that. And it really drives you even harder to make sure that everything's clean, proper, and presented well for your customers. So for Truett, with everything on full display here, he's got to be on top of his game. Plus, remember, Truett has that mindset that every customer is like serving the governor or the president. Going back to those paperboy roots, they're grown very deep inside of him now, serving his customers to the absolute best of his ability. And so, with this super simple menu of a chicken sandwich, fries, coleslaw, lemon pie, and Coke, they opened their first Chick-fil-A restaurant in November of 1967. When we opened, we were an immediate hit. Once people tasted our product, they came back and bought more. And as the chapter winds down here, Truett, he gives us some valuable words of wisdom. "Looking back, I can see that I had been preparing for 21 years to open the first Chick-fil-A restaurant. Income from the Dwarf House provided financial support for the new venture. We opened 17 Chick-fil-A restaurants before I took a dollar out of the company. Even more important were the lessons I had learned, which helped ensure our future success." 21 years. That is amazing. Working day in and day out. As we heard him say, the lessons that he learned helped him become successful. If he just tried to do this concept from the start without the experience, without all of those years, I think it would have been a higher chance of failure. And I mean, at the start, everything was bone-in chicken anyways. They didn't even have that chicken breast. He needed that experience to really learn how to operate a restaurant. This is something we've seen in others that we've studied here on the show. For example, Milton Hershey, it took him 24 years to make his first Hershey bar. Sam Walton, as we know, it took him 20 years in retailing to open his first Walmart. Jim Casey, he was the founder of UPS. Listen to this, 68 years. You heard that right, 68 years. It took him that long to develop nationwide shipping for UPS. The lesson here for you and I is that there's no overnight success. When we follow our purpose in life and we focus on our love, we will have success. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to take a lot of hard work along the way. We need to look for the opportunities because they are out there. They're going to present themselves, and we need to take the time to educate ourselves and be cautious on what we're doing, but follow our purpose and passion in life, and we will have success. Now, what's going to be next for Truett? This is another lesson here that comes up because he's starting to have some success. And one day he's approached by a man who offers to buy him out. And he's offering Truett a lot of money. He's saying, I can open 500 locations a year for you, no problem. And a lot of people might be tempted by this. But after 21 years, he's really a wise man and he knows what he's doing here. And he uses this experience to his benefits. He says, I wasn't interested. He might be able to raise the money he needs, but to hire and properly train the thousands of people necessary to serve customers in 500 restaurants across the country would be a monumental undertaking and eventually would lead to a disaster. In all my years in the restaurant business, I have tried never to overextend. I'm satisfied stepping from one plateau to the next, making sure that we're doing everything right before moving on. And I wrote one word in my book next to that. That word is correct. It's far better to take one step at a time. Learn what you're doing, do it well, expand. Do that new expansion well, expand. Keep going like that. You can't just take something you're doing well and blow it up 500 times. That's simply not going to work. Now, as Truett keeps moving forward, he's going to have another offer to buy the business out. In this particular offer, it's not super fast growth, but it is a big number, one that would financially set Truett and his family up for the rest of their lives. It comes from a company that he really respected and he knew very well. He knows that they have the means to grow responsibly. And what they want to do is they want to make Truett an officer of the company, at least for the first 5 years. And Truett, he takes this really seriously and he talks to all of his friends and his family about this, trying to get their input about what he should do here. We prayed about this mountain-sized decision, whether to give up all basic control of the future of Chick-fil-A for guarantee of financial well-being. In the end, we decided not to sell out. Such a good choice to not sell out. I commend Truett. I have to imagine that was a very, very difficult decision. And if you're thinking about selling, you really have to put a lot of due diligence into who that buyer is. We saw in episode 12 how Saul Price sold his FedMart business to a gentleman by the name of Hugo Mann. When Mann was trying to buy Saul's business, he was extremely friendly and he was respectful and he promised to let Saul continue to run the U.S. operations how he saw fit. But after the sale, everything changes. Hugo Mann, he was one of those masked men. He looked one way on the surface, but inside he was completely different. Let me just read for you here real quickly from the Saul Price biography about how this goes down. I'm just going to paraphrase a couple of sentences here. The first indication of real trouble occurred at the first meeting of the new board. This was the first time that Saul and I experienced the real Hugo Mann. Rather than the friendly person we had seen, Mann launched into a 90-minute tirade criticizing Saul and FedMart's performance. After the board meeting, Saul told me it was only a matter of time before Mann would move to oust him from the company. Saul said that we should continue to operate the company in a responsible way, but prepare for the inevitable. And for them, the inevitable would eventually be leaving the company in the next couple of months. While that was devastating for Saul Price, it did lead him directly into opening up the Price Club, which would eventually sell out to Costco. So there was huger opportunities in there for Saul and his team of talented executives but it's just a strong, strong reminder for us that if you're going to sell the love of your life, we have to be extra careful. Take the time to do the due diligence to know who we're working with if that's something you're considering to sell your business. And another question to ask yourself is, what are you going to do after you sell that business? What's the next thing that you're going to work on? I mean, if you're going to go into retirement, completely understand that. But if you don't have a next best thing to work on, if you're selling the love of your life, what are you going to do next? You should really think deeply about that. So for Truett, as we heard, he decides not to sell his business and time marches on. He opens his second Chick-fil-A restaurant in 1968. This time he's working with about 1,000 square feet. He uses the same simple menu. And as Chick-fil-A continues to expand, he develops this concept of an operator for his stores. This is different from a traditional franchise sort of system. And I just wanted to take you through how this works. So, what they do, Chick-fil-A, that is, they'll go out and they'll buy the land and they'll pay for the construction of the restaurant. In modern day terms, this might cost $2, $3, $4 million for them to build a new location. Chick-fil-A then turns the restaurant over to an operator, and the deal is that Chick-fil-A takes 15% of the gross sales, and then they split the profits 50-50 between Chick-fil-A and the operator. And Truett says that as of 2002, when this book was written, that more than half of their operators are making over the $100,000 a year mark. A lot of them make over $200,000 and some even made up to $300,000. Truett says the key here was picking loyal operators. And I found this really insightful on how they pick operators. And this just feeds into a similar way in which we should be hiring employees that work for us. He says, in my first meeting with a potential operator, I explained that our commitment is going to be like a marriage, with no consideration to divorce. We're much more careful about selecting operators when we know we can't get rid of them easily. When selecting franchisees, we look for individuals who are willing to make and follow through on the kind of commitment to the Chick-fil-A business. We expect our operators to abide by several tenets that we adhere to. And then he lists the tenets here, which are: people want to work with a person, not for a company. Each new operator is committed to a single restaurant. Operators will hold no outside employment or other business interest. We choose operators for their ability and their influence, so we want them in the restaurants. We expect quality interaction between operators and the team members. We expect quality interaction between operators and customers, both in the restaurant and in the community. And this lifelong commitment to the operator, it extends to the crew members, and then in turn, it extends to the customers that they service. And for me, I believe that I can see this in action each time I go through the Chick-fil-A drive-through line that's near my house. When I go through that line, there's always, 50, 60 cars in that triple drive-through line. Where I go to, it sits up kind of higher and you can look across the highway. And on the other side of the road, there's other restaurant businesses over there. There's an Arby's, a Popeyes, and a Wendy's. When I look over there during rush hour, say it's dinner time, there's no more than like maybe 2 or 3 cars in line at any one of those given restaurants. And here I am sitting in a line with like 50, 60 cars waiting to place my order at Chick-fil-A. It's really all of these lessons that we've talked about up to this point that feed into the business, that feed into those customers. And it's just obvious that you can feel the service, you can see the cleanliness, you can experience the quality in the food. Those things are all magic. And that's why there's 50, 60 cars in the Chick-fil-A drive-through line. And across the street, there's lucky to be maybe 10 cars at those 3 restaurants combined. Now, if we hop back to the book here, Truett, he goes on to talk more about restaurant operations. And I just wanted to pull out a few key sentences here. I believe that each one is really worth their weight in gold, if you ask me. Sometimes the franchise owner will work directly in the restaurant, but most of the ones I have met are looking to own several units from which they can draw income. They aren't interested in actually wearing a uniform and servicing customers. I think that's another reason why those restaurants across the street from my Chick-fil-A here are dead. The owners of those franchises aren't in the business working them like the operators of the Chick-fil-A restaurants. Truett goes on to mention this really important aspect of hiring employees. He says, character traits are the most important. Everything else can be learned. I believe that is 100% true, especially in the restaurant industry. Everything can be learned. Character traits are absolutely 100% the most important. And that's something that we saw with Kent Taylor when we talked about Texas Roadhouse. When he turned around one of his restaurants, he says that he started hiring people that were fun and energetic and were good with customers. And he said you could train them to do anything, but you can't fix someone who doesn't have motivation, who doesn't have the proper attitude. Always hire for the proper attitude. Another thing that I really liked here is true. It says that when they hire a strong operator, they see this really feed into the crew. The most important job an operator has is selecting his people. And then where do they find good people? He says, we go to schools, churches, youth organizations, and other places where quality people gather and tell them what we have to offer. Then if we go even deeper here at the crew level, when we hire, we always look for people who work well with others. Work habits and history are important. They don't even need restaurant experience. We can teach them the Chick-fil-A way. When operators interview potential team members, they look for good general appearance, how they're dressed and groomed, and whether they appear to be taking care of themselves. I'm impressed when an applicant has already begun earning money by cleaning yards or doing other jobs around the neighborhood. Truett goes on to say, good people attract good people, which is just super key. I agree 100%. Good people attract good people. When you have good people in your organization, they're just going to tell other good people, and that's going to draw in more good people. So Chick-fil-A, they continue to keep growing. And there's just one more major section in the book that I wanted to cover with you before we close out the show today. The time frame is 1980, and Chick-fil-A at this point, they have more than 100 restaurants they've opened. Their future is looking really, really bright. The company has just spent around $10 million to build their new headquarter locations. But shortly after this, interest rates in the United States skyrocket to 21%. That causes the economy to stall. Sales at Chick-fil-A, they start to slump. Then two of their competitors, Wendy's and McDonald's, they finally figure out how to start selling their own versions of the chicken sandwich. And this puts a lot of added pressure on the chicken suppliers. Demand goes up a lot. Well, the price goes up a lot. So at this point in time, they're facing a lot of difficult decisions in the business with cash flow, and if they're even going to be able to survive and maintain the viability as a business. Truett says that he really doesn't like raising prices for customers. He tries to keep them as steady as he possibly can because he knows from experience that customers don't like big surprises like that. And he digs in really deep here. And he says, in 1982, I felt the squeeze myself. I took no salary. I believed it was a necessary step for the long-term good of the company, and I didn't want anyone else in the company to have to take a pay cut. Everything I owned was wrapped up in the Chick-fil-A name. My name was on every note, and it wasn't hard for me to envision a total loss. So how exactly is he going to get himself out of this mess? Well, he schedules a 2-day offsite meeting with his executive team so that they could strategize and figure out what in the world they're going to do. But after 2 days, they hadn't really made a lot of progress here. And at one point, Truett's son Dan, he asks some really basic questions. He says, why are we in business? Why are we even here? And why are we even alive? And Dan, he's really pressing the team to dig in deep on this. Truett's initial response was, well, we're in business to serve the customer and make money, but that's not what Dan was after. So they take some time and they all go around the room. All 8 executives basically agreed to the following. We were unanimous in our belief that each of us wanted to glorify God in all that we say and do. And then he goes on to say the following. In my own personal way, I had committed the company to his purpose, but had not done so publicly. It became obvious that the committee was moving towards doing just that. By the end of the day, we had developed 2 statements, which became Chick-fil-A's corporate purpose. And then I'm just going to read the corporate purpose here. To glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us, to have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. So once they arrive back home, the company uses this new-found purpose to revamp their quality, service, and their cleanliness. The goal is really to be the best in market in each of these categories. Truett says in the following months, their sales increased by more than 30%. For Truett and the team, their confidence starts to return in the business. More importantly, this takes a lot of pressure off of Truett and his team because they know that Chick-fil-A has a higher purpose, and he moves from seeing himself as the owner of Chick-fil-A to seeing it as God's, and that he is just trusted to run the business. He says the following. When we established our corporate purpose, I was reminded that I had given Chick-fil-A to God. I operate it and take care of it along with our staff and our operators, but it's his business. When I remember that, I have a totally different feeling about it. And I really do think that's an extremely valuable lesson for both you and I to ensure that your business has a purpose. And it's the same with your personal life. Does it have a purpose? And no matter what it is, when we have a purpose, there's no hard days because we're doing exactly what it is we love in life. For me in the podcast, my purpose is to share all of these valuable lessons, no matter what they might be, so that they're of service for you, so that you can take these lessons and improve your business, and in turn make things a little bit better for you and your customers. If I can accomplish that, my purpose has been fulfilled to be of service to you and your customers. I ask you, my friend, seek your purpose and follow it with all of your passion. For Truett and Chick-fil-A, they're going to go on to open over 1,000 freestanding locations at the time of this writing in 2002. At the time I'm recording this, July of 2026, it looks like Chick-fil-A has around 3,400 locations. Truett Cathy, he would pass away in 2014. Even though it's been 12 years, I'm sure that he's looking down, smiling upon Chick-fil-A as they go about carrying on their purpose to serve God in all that they do. And that's where we'll leave the show today. I highly recommend the book if you have the chance to pick it up. It's packed full of insights, like I mentioned at the top of the show. It's really a fast read, and I do believe that you can learn a lot from this particular book. I just want to take a moment to say thank you for listening today. If you'd like to support the show, it's super simple. You can just subscribe on your favorite listening platform. If you have a moment, possibly you could leave me a review, or even better, share it with a friend. My goal here is really to keep everything ad-free. I do believe that's the way to go. I don't know how this is going to work out long term. I do want to continue with the podcast and producing these quality episodes so that we can all learn from these great entrepreneurs and these founders out there. And I just value your time for listening. That's more than enough for me. If you can follow the show and leave a review, that would be awesome. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Until next time, make it a beautiful day in the neighborhood, my friend.